Hi everyone. Now we are going to look at Taiwan in these 2 weeks, and I hope some of you had the chance to go, and some of you are going to have a chance to go. Taiwan is a very interesting place, and I personally have been there several times, Taipei, Kaohsiung, and some other areas, and I hope you will enjoy seeing them. And if you see one of the pictures on my flyer for this class, it's actually the Taipei Tower. And I welcome you to also search some pictures of the architecture and the 故宫博物馆, the Museum of Palace, and other areas in Taiwan. Is very interesting. So I just want to do a short video that's to guide you through a little bit of Taiwan history and to see what you should pay attention to while you watch the movies and do your assignments. So very interestingly, for the Taiwan and Hong Kong, what we need to pay attention is the identity of people and identity of the place of itself. So it's very different from the cities that we cover in the past few weeks, including Beijing and Shanghai. So, Taiwan has been, again, a very interesting place as its own identity. So currently it's called Republic of China. We can call it Nationalist or ROC, which I will get to in a little bit, and which is different from mainland China. The political body is called People's Republic of China. As you know, it's PRC. So Taiwan is the 50th largest country in the world in terms of population, and making it the 16th population dense country. And so in Taiwan, we have native Taiwanese and we have Aboriginals and we have Han Chinese, and 90% of population right now are Han Chinese. And again, the Taiwan's identity is very interesting because from the beginning, it was very conflicted. So beginning in the 16th century, mainland Chinese moved to Taiwan. Then the Spanish came in 1626. Then a lot of regime changes. And we can see it was also colonized by Dutch in the 17th century. So Han Chinese then came in, and usually those are the Chinese from Hakka and Fujian and Guangdong, these areas. That's why today, if you see the older generation of Taiwanese who moved from mainland China, they're mostly from those areas, they either speak Hakka language or Fukienese and Cantonese. And so in the 1624, the Spanish colonized it. And afterwards, so the Ming loyalists, Koxinga in 1662, gained the power. Then we know 1683 is the Qing dynasty. Then 1895, Japan colonized it, right? And then we all know this 1949 split, that which I will talk about a little bit. So the main era that we talk about, or of Taiwanese history in the contemporary time, we often touch on two periods. One is the Sino-Japanese War that happened in 1985. And of course that we know that's the first Sino-Japan War. And what happened is after that, uh, we have the Japanese colonization of Taiwan in 1895, right? Sorry, I probably spoke the wrong year a little bit earlier. So there's always this question of, is Taiwan Chinese, right? Or is it its own island? And I will leave you to the discussion of it, right? Of course, it's a controversial idea. And the reason that we ask that is also about this internal civil war that happened, as you know, from 1945 to 1947. Then, there in 1949, there creates two divides. So if you search big divide, China versus Taiwan, then you can find a lot of information. So there is this internal civil war between the Kuomintang and today's political party in China, the Communist Party. And you know, and of course, like at the time when it was right after the Japanese colonization and the occupation in China, and China, it's the Communist Party then won, right? So before, as you know, that in China, it was actually in the early 19th, the 20th century, it was ruled by Republic of China. But after that, in 1945, then you know, then there was the internal civil war. Then, you know, the Communist Party occupied mainland China. So then a lot of Kuomintang, so first leaders, and then a lot of entrepreneurs and others follow them. So during 1945 to 49, during the war and after the war, so a lot of them actual exile to Taiwan. So as you see, a lot of early writers, they actually write about their exile experience from mainland China to Taiwan, and they do have this nostalgia for mainland China and the Republic. And what happened in February 28th incident, it's a very famous incident in 1947 and happened on February 28th. That's why it's called 228事件, which is February 28th incident. So that really portrayed the point that the like people in Taiwan was very unhappy with the government of the time because the the Kuomintang government just moved to Taiwan and then occupied Taiwan. And as you know, at that time, that a lot of the Taiwanese, they were actually were used to the Japanese like colonization. They spoke Japanese, and all of a sudden, the mainland Chinese like or the communists came, the Kuomintang came in, and they have this massive re-education of people speaking Mandarin, and so there is this divide. If you have some Taiwanese friends, then you know that the older generation will speak Japanese, and the newer generation speak Mandarin, and they have actually generation divide, right? So the government and the public, therefore, there was a big conflict, and the February 28th incident is a big symbol of that conflict. And of course, there's this very strict martial law that everyone knows, and then how the government enforced over the public. So in terms of culture, we know that the basic culture of Taiwanese has the native Taiwanese culture and also the Chinese culture. And Japanese culture is also in the formation of Taiwan culture because of the Japanese colonization from 1895 to 1945. And that's a long time. And of course, in the 60s and 70s, as many of you know, a lot of Taiwanese actually fled away from Taiwan to come to the United States. And also at that time, Taiwan was an ally of America. Therefore, there was this strong fancy craziness of going to America, American phrase in Taiwan at the time. So we will call it, so there is a strong sense of Americanization in Taiwan as well. So Taiwan is a very mixed in terms of mixed society in terms of cultures. And as you see from earlier, that there are a lot of discontinuities in history and culture of Taiwan, and it's definitely a cultural hybrid. And language is very different from mainland Chinese writers if you read a lot of their literature. So in the 1950s, we saw a lot of anti-communist literature. In the 60s, we have modernist literature because of the influence from Europe and America. And they're purely very literary. In the 70s, there emerged a bunch of nativist literature, Taiwanese writers, and ethnic shift, because at the time they are like as such as this emerging force against this westernization, modernization. In 80s and 90s, we see Taiwan literature big open up in the political system, democracy, and Taiwanization is political, social, culture, and ethnic. So I could go on and on about Taiwan culture and history. And of course, if you're more interested, please search it yourself. There are a lot of history document about it and Wikipedia and all that. But I just gave you a very little rough background about it so that you know, well, Taiwan as a history and culture is kind of a very um, mixed, but also very interesting island, very interesting history out there. And so please pay attention to the identity of Taiwan and Taiwanese while you watch these movies and pay attention to the changes from Japanese being a Japanese colony to its current stage or its modernization as well. That's all.